many of these in Smithville down here. That's the conclusion of the talks. Now I'll be happy to answer any questions. And in case of the first one, yes, there really is a frac field in Pennsylvania. It's off I-80 with Mountain.
Is this Ryan Rock too?
Yes. Does the board have any questions?
Board?
Okay.
We ended up going down to one of these drill sites down in Pennsylvania. I noticed on your slides they're all dated 2009.
To delete it.
Or whatever, some of your slides that you had for the wells and the
Right.
rigs and stuff.
That's when I first put the talk together.
Okay. Since then, your slides on the drilling rig show 2 containment ponds.
Right.
The ones down in the Cabot, Chesapeake, they had all containers down there. They had actually no open ponds or anything for their fracking fluids, and the fracking fluids were recycled.
I don't know if it's required in Pennsylvania, but it may be that the DEC SGIS, when it comes out, is going to require tanks for all the New York State wells.
So the ones that you showed will be...
Hopefully not. Okay. But we were going to have to see. They say that the SGIS has grown from 1,500 pages to 4,000 now.
So inadvertently, you're giving us a scenario of what it was to what it's going to be when the GIS comes out.
Well, still, I would say the majority of the United States. Certainly, that's the standard out west. In fact, out west, we don't even want it.
We're not talking about all that.
You don't know what the SGIS is going to say. This is for the board.
Speaking to that,
Very fast.
you obviously have studied this a lot, and a lot of the mistakes or accidents, whatever you call it, in Pennsylvania. How do you feel from your research that in these 4 years that New York has had the moratorium on this kind of building, what kind of progress do you think they've made, or what kind of improvements do you look forward to as they come to the work?
Well, certainly the tanks. I'm not really sure they've done anything about the problem of methane winding up in people's well water. The problem is that there's a certain inherent limitation to how well they can case and seal the well.
Speaking as a geologist, I was wondering about that. And I couldn't tell from your pictures, I think you alluded to it. Forgive my geology 101 memory, but those layers, you said slanted slightly. How accurate were those pictures? I mean, in terms of, yeah, like.
Oh well, that is a projection from the actual surface geology. So of course, it's quite accurate up here at this end.
Yeah.
It's less accurate down there. But I mean, just as a rough rule of thumb, yeah, it's sloping about a degree or so to the southwest over in Pennsylvania.
Degree per,
A degree of dip.
Okay. Is one of your major concerns with pressurized solution from the fracking process to follow faults and fissures within the rock layers, or?
Well, certainly. I mean, the lion's share of the cases where people's wells get polluted is because the wells aren't properly sealed and the methane, the shale gas gets onto them. But there are a few cases like Pavilion, Wyoming, Guilford, Colorado, Jackson, West Virginia, where the frac fluid seems to have gotten into the water. And yes, I mean, in very rare cases, faults, or the other possibility is that many of these places have been drilled before and they've been properly plugged up.
Is that typically the problem then? Is that it's improper procedural things that cause problems?
Well, it's a problem about the inherent difficulty of the technology. Oh, I know that. Let me give you an idea. When you see some of the diagrams from the DEC, and they show these beautiful cased wells with the layers of concrete, they often don't deal with reality, with the physical engineering difficulty. Take, for instance, when the first case was let's say they drill a hole down, as I said, it's about a foot in diameter. Then they'll take the casing, which is about 10 inches diameter, and they'll run it on that. There's very, very good space in between, about an inch on either side. And drill casing like drill bits, drill pipe is typically a 30-inch length. So if they're going down a 30-foot length, so if they're going to case all the way down to an aquifer several hundred feet long, imagine a chain of these things going on, let's say 2 feet. Now, the case though, they're going to squeeze cement down the center of that and off this tiny little gap between the two. And the wellbore is not a nice smooth surface like this. In places the rock is soft, this is to chip off, this being the aquifer, water is either drilling or oozing, or in some places where there are fractures and faults, pouring into these. So it's just an inherent difficulty. You're all the way up at the surface. You're squeezing this cement down 800 feet. There are centering, and they go every few hundred feet. But as I said, again, you're dealing with trying to keep something in a centering space only an inch on either side. So,
Well, we saw some cutaways that seem to be a lot bigger than that. And I don't know if it's.
well, there's the surface casing, but that only goes, that's typically 18 to 24 inches in diameter, but that only goes down usually a few tens of feet to stabilize the soil.
75 feet.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to tell the board that I have my own pictures that I took last summer of these kids being dug and lined, and then went back and had pictures when they were filmed. And then while we were going around Chesapeake, I drove around the hills and saw those dead items.
Those are freshwater containment ponds.
How do you know what I saw?
Folks, remember, this is not. Anyone else? Just comment?
Yeah, as a geologist, then how can you explain how we can light some of these faucets on fire?
Well, I mean, the shale has been down there with the gas for hundreds of millions of years. It's been leaking up all the time. So there's a certain amount of background methane that's been leaking into our well waters. Some places get just a trace of it. Some people, like the neighbor down at the bottom of my hill, actually had to install a vent on his water well because it gets that much methane. However, there's no question that some of the property owners close to these water wells originally started out with perfectly clear, drinkable water, and all of a sudden their water was gray, fizzy, and cloudy. I mean, what happened is something in the drilling process has moved that methane that is naturally down there much faster up through the aquifer and stirred everything up. It could be because the casing leaks. It could be because there are naturally fractures, which the stuff comes up through. But yeah, I mean, it seems pretty certain that for a certain percentage of wells close to the gas well, their water is going to get riled up. Now, how bad this is for you, I mean, certainly the water is unpotable. You wouldn't want to drink the stuff. But whether the stuff is actually poisonous and how long it takes for the aquifer to settle back down to its original state, that hasn't been studied, chiefly because the industry insists that there's no such problem.
I have a question. You just said that the fund wells didn't actually have gas in them because it was seeping up for all these years.
Yes.
And one of the things we hear from the gas company is that, well, there's no chance that our operation is going to pollute your well because we're drilling down 7,000 feet or so many thousand feet. Now, as a geologist, if the gas is leaking into the wells, why might there not be fissures in the rock or other pathways, even that go down 7,000 feet, that will allow this fracking fluid to get into some people's wells?
Well, there certainly are. If you've probably driven past any of these outcroppings of rock along the interstates here, and you look at them, and they're not a nice, solid mass of rock like a headstone. There are all sorts of bedding planes that go this way. There are joints that go this way and that way to cut through with it. the water does not diffuse through solid rocks. It goes through these cracks and fractures and faults. So yes, I mean, we know that there are some cases where the water does come up from all the way down where the gas lives to where we are now, because, for example, there are such things as mineral springs.
I find that troubling.
Correct. And there's a famous one just south of the border, Salt Spring State Park in Pennsylvania. There are some mineral springs up here along the edge of the Mohawk Valley. These are places where these mineral-rich waters, far down in the ground, have been naturally coming up for millennia. And of course, the gas industry insists it doesn't happen.
And even if this doesn't happen in a couple of years, or what about 30 years from now, 40 years from now?
Well, we did a big study up in the Canadian oil drilling fields, Alberta, I believe. And I think they looked at hundreds of thousands of wells. And they found, you know, not necessarily their standards of casing would be as high as ours, but they found that about 6% of the wells were leaking originally. And then they found with each successive year, more of them leaked. So by the time that, I forget whether it was 40 or 50 years out, like half of them were leaking. I mean, because half of the containment in the casing is steel. The other half is the concrete. Now, if you don't get a proper coating of concrete on that steel, it may not leak eventually, but in short order, that steel is going to corrode away, and then you've got leaks.
Thank you.